The Mercedes-Benz S-Class is widely considered the best car in the world, and for good reason. It's the benchmark in just so many areas. And over the years, over the generations, the car has just got better and better. In fact, a lot of what you see on an S-Class today makes its way to mainstream cars in the years and sometimes even decades to come.
So what does that make this then? It's called the EQS. It's another Mercedes flagship sedan. It's about the same size as an S-Class, and it's even nearly the same price as an S-Class. And of course, it's also electric. And we keep hearing that electric cars are the future. So does that make this the next best car in the world? Well, maybe it's not that obvious. Let's see what each of these brings to the table, what's new and what has stayed the same.
We've got the cars together at the majestic World Towers by Lodha, among the finest addresses you can have in Mumbai. It's a fitting location because the choice between an EQS and S-Class is likely a very real decision for the well-heeled residents here. Let's start with the way these cars look. When you see them together, it's clear that these cars come from very different schools of thought. The new S-Class, for all its modernity, still follows the classic cab rearward design. Even in this long wheelbase, guys, it's clear that about a third of the car is engine, after that is the passenger compartment, and then there's a luggage area behind. It's regal, it's powerful, it's timeless.
The EQS, on the other hand, is like a drop of water. It's been shaped in a wind tunnel to carve out the smoothest possible path through the air, with a drag coefficient of just 0.20. It's every bit as futuristic as the S-Class is traditional. Reducing drag or resistance is crucial for maximizing range in an EV, but really, with a glasshouse that stretches further forward and back, it should be really spacious too.
The S-Class as ever remains quite literally the face of the Mercedes model range. It's the traditional radiator grille with the three-pointed bonnet ornament sitting proudly on the nose. There is a bit of flash with the intricate LED tail lamps out back, but lashings of chrome in all the right places make things feel suitably somber.
The black plastic panel that replaces the grille on the EQS fits flush with the bonnet and headlamps, with a big star at its center and dozens of tiny stars speckled around it and a light bar up top. There's a light bar at the tail too, and the treatment here is altogether softer than that of the S-Class. There are subtler differences as well that clue you into their positioning, like the EQS getting frameless windows, while the S-Class gets soft closed doors.
The other big difference is that the EQS isn't technically a sedan. It has a liftback boot. Though its capacity of 610 litres might not seem that much bigger than the S-Class's 550 litres, you get a larger doorway and the ability to stack more vertically. You can even fold the rear seats down for SUV-like practicality. But then its spare tire sits in the boot, while in the more conventional S-Class, it sits under a false floor.
What do you think of the way these two look, and which of them would you rather have? Let us know down in the comments section, and be sure to like this video, share it with your friends and subscribe to Autocar India. Now, while I've driven the S-Class extensively before, this is my first experience in an EQS out on the road. I'm quite intrigued. Now, you get into the EQS and immediately your attention, of course, is drawn to this massive hyper screen, especially set to its full map mode where it fills the screen with 3D maps, a little icon of an EQS down there. It is truly something special, especially when you're around town, not right now. You can see the buildings recreated in 3D perfectly. It's just so great. I will say the hyper screen part where it extends as one continuous piece of glass is a bit of a gimmick. It is very clearly 3 different screens connected by black plastic. And actually that is a bit of an annoyance because the black plastic is very prone to collecting dust, and it's angled upwards in such a way that this instrument cluster in front of me bounces off a lot of light, which is a bit annoying. It's actually got a hooded binnacle, a very slight hooded binnacle, but that doesn't do much to keep the sunlight out. But you can't fault the quality of the graphics, the resolution, the frame rate. It's all so crisp, and I know there's a lot of processing power behind it going on, behind the scenes. But okay, hyper screen aside, what a cabin layout. This is unlike any Mercedes I've ever been in before. It's just so radical and such a huge departure from the traditional Mercedes look and feel that we're used to. Oh yes, the materials are all still absolutely top-notch. Cross-stitched leather, beautiful colors, this bronze finish, which is now the EQ theme that Mercedes is doing with their electric cars. It all just feels so nice and so rich. Where the S-Class cabin sort of layers itself onto you, this one sort of cocoons you with its flowing lines that just come slashing down on the doors like that. So unusual, but shows you where this car is headed and who it's focused on. One thing that feels unexpectedly traditional in this otherwise radical interior is this central storage area over here. You see, because this is a born electric platform, it doesn't have a gearbox down here, and they have freed up some space as a result. It's a huge open bin that you can see through to the other side. However, they still have this floating console high up here which has some storage and a wireless charger in there that sort of takes away the effect of the added space that you would have got if they had just left it open. But hey, that's just my view on it. It's still pretty useful. You can store a lot in here and a whole lot down there. It's just not very easily accessible. What's also a pleasant surprise is that though this car has a lot of performance, it's got 523 horsepower, it doesn't feel unmanageable. A lot of EVs tend to be a switch on or a switch off when you touch the accelerator. All the power, all the torque, all at once. But no, not this one. It eases you into the power, and at light throttle inputs, progress is gentle, and that's what you want with a big, luxurious Mercedes limousine. Of course, it is also very sensitive to how hard and how fast you punch down on the accelerator. And give it a brisk push, and this car will just leap forward. You have to be prepared for the kind of performance this thing has. It can be quite brutal, and I'm not even in sport mode. And despite all this, it still won't give you range anxiety. And we have to talk about the range, don't we? This car has a claimed 857 kilometers of range on the ARAI test cycle. That is unbelievable. And of course, real world numbers do vary, but let's just look at it this way. When I got into the car this morning and the charge was 100%, it said I had over 750 kilometers of range remaining. That's impressive any way you slice it. Comfy in that knowledge, you're free to have some fun with the EQS 580 pretty much anytime you want. If you should dare to put it into sport mode, that seriously quickens up responses and adds a bit of sci-fi noise into the cabin. Who needs the AMG version? You've got all the performance you need right here in this EQS 580. The steering also weighs up a little bit more in sport mode, and the suspension becomes a touch firmer. A little bit too firm, if you ask me. Another pleasant surprise is just how agile this EQS is. It's a big car, and S-classes tend to be soft and wallowy, and that's just as well. But this one, it has an agility, a tautness to it that you just don't expect of a big limousine like this. A lot of that is down to the standard rear wheel steering, which really just lets it dart from lane to lane with the slightest input on the steering wheel. Where this obviously comes in handy is while making U-turns. Getting around in the EQS is like making a U-turn in a small hatchback, whereas the S-Class requires a far more measured approach. Now, something we've always had to be wary of in S-Classes of the past, and something that applies to this EQS as well, is that it has a very long wheelbase, and that means it's all too easy to scrape its belly on really high speed breakers. Now that's an even bigger problem in the EQS, and that's because the battery pack sits between the wheels, so it's a little bit lower in fact than an S-Class even when you raise the air suspension. And you have to be extra careful in this car on our roads. Not making matters easier is that the air suspension raise function is hidden away in a menu you access by pressing the car menu, and there it is. An unnecessary two-step process for a feature you're going to have to use very, very often on our roads. Luckily, the EQS comes with a setting that remembers based on GPS location where all you raise the air suspension and offers you a handy little prompt on the homepage saying, do you want to raise the air suspension? You did it here last time. And that really has come in handy on our journey today. There you go, approaching a speed breaker that I've been to before, and it says to raise the vehicle, tap here. One touch. And there we are, but I'm still going to be a little bit cautious with this one. From the driver's seat then, the EQS successfully whooshes into the future in a way no Mercedes before it has. Surely then, there's more of that in the back seat.
My first point of note in the EQS, the cabin's color. If you're a clean freak, you will have a problem in the EQS's interior, and that's because of the choice of cabin color. It's nearly white, and in our conditions, it is going to be an absolute pain to keep clean. So I'm sure your driver will have to work overtime to keep this car's interior sparkling clean. From color, let's switch to comfort. If you've been chauffeured in a regular S-Class, the EQS's rear seat won't quite hit the spot, and quite literally so. The seat squab is a bit short, so you don't get the under thigh support that you might be looking for. And what also doesn't help matters is that the seating position is quite knees up, and that's because the heavy battery pack is placed under the floor, which pushes the floor height that little bit up. As for the seat itself, it's really well cushioned, but again, it doesn't offer that level of adjustability that you get in an S-Class. You can adjust the backrest angle, you can move these pillow-laden headrests up and down, but that's about it. There's no option to adjust the seat squab. And on the whole, your seating position can only be altered to a very limited extent. And sure, while the rear seats do get ventilation and heating, there's no massage function. The EQS is a very tech-laden car, but when you're sat at the back, you'll realize that all the goodies and gizmos are concentrated up front. For instance, you get these massive screens at the front, but at the back you don't get rear entertainment screens. You do get an S-Class-like tablet, but if you poke around, you will note that there are far fewer features that this tablet controls. And an omission of great importance in India is no sunblinds for the rear windows. Don't get me wrong, because the back seat is still really good by any measure. Now, in terms of space, you are very well taken care of in an EQS. I'm just under 6 feet tall. No shortage of headroom, no shortage of legroom, and when I want more space, all I need to do is move the front passenger seat forward. The EQS is more accommodating for a third passenger. One area where the EQS's back seat has a clear advantage over the S-Classes is in third passenger comfort. So you push up the center armrest, you get a seat here, but what makes all the difference is that the floor is near flat. But who are we kidding? This back seat is best enjoyed with just two. A silent experience is what you expect in an EQS, and a silent experience is what you get. Of course, one of the highlights on the EQS has got to be refinement. The electric motors don't make any noise when you don't want them to, though you have the option to shuffle between sound profiles to enhance the experience. Then you also get Mercedes' top tier level of soundproofing. So the world outside is really a world very far outside. The surprise though was ride comfort. In terms of ride comfort, there really isn't all that much between an S-Class and an EQS. And that's saying a lot, because the EQS actually rides on larger wheels. That size difference reflects when you're going over bumpy surfaces, you feel more of the surface beneath. But when you're going faster, it is a very well-damped experience here too. So all in all, the EQS does more for the driver than the driven. But that crazy performance is still just a command away. Gulab Singh, gaadi bhagao. While I've been driven around, Gavin spent time behind the wheel of the S-Class. I wonder if his startup founder persona takes to the charms of the classic S.
Well, this feels nice and familiar, back in an S-Class. I know the driver's seat isn't the preferred seat in an S-Class, but it's good to be back nonetheless. That long bonnet, three-pointed star out at the very edge. It's a regal feeling, it's a special feeling. Now, I'll admit, when I first drove this new S-Class, I thought it was a little bit too ostentatious with its interior design by S-Class standards compared to S-Classes of old. But now, in the context of the EQS, it feels nice and classy, relatively understated. But though it may look old school relative to its EV sibling, it's still packing some tech under the skin. Now yes, there's a lot of wow factor in the EQS with its hyper-screen layout, but you have to remember that essentially it's the same MBUX infotainment system underneath. In fact, the system debuted right here on the S-Class. The S-Class infotainment walked so that the hyper-screen could run, if you will. And well, almost all the functions are there, for better or for worse. It's a beautiful screen, 12.8 inches, portrait layout. All the major shortcut icons fall easily to hand, but it is still a shame that you have to control the air conditioning with the touchscreen and there are no physical buttons. There are a few physical shortcuts, but they're all still capacitive, which is a bit annoying. And yeah, that's a problem in the EQS as well. And I absolutely love the digital instrument cluster on this car, and ironically that's because it isn't part of the hyperscreen. It's a self-contained standalone screen and it's bolted a little bit more upright. That means it catches fewer reflections. The hyperscreen is so much larger, there's so much more reflective plastic and it's angled a bit upwards, and that means it's constantly bouncing reflections of your eye and you can't see it as clearly as you can see this one. Amazing! And you gotta just love these big plush throne-like chairs. Yes, the ones in the back are the place to be, but these are almost as good. They're big, they're plush, they're super comfortable, and they're very adjustable. However, for this locally assembled S350D, they've lost the cooling and massage functions. Now that's reserved only for the back seat. You still get heating though, and memory function of course, but I guess that's only fair for a car that's primarily chauffeur driven. Now, of course, the S350D is the least powerful model in the range. The 450 petrol and, of course, the 580 Maybach have way more performance, but it's still very, very potent. 286 horsepower, 600 Newton meters of torque, and a 9-speed automatic gearbox that reacts quickly enough, but above all else is incredibly smooth with its shifts, which is what you want in an S-Class. One thing I do really miss in this car, however, is the rear wheel steering. We tried it on the original S400D, and of course it's there in the EQS, and taking some U-turns today in the EQS and then in this, what a difference. You really need to plan ahead taking a U-turn in an S-Class, or rather your chauffeur does. What's also interesting is that though both these cars have almost exactly the same wheelbase, 3.2 meters of it, which means there's a lot of gap between the front and the rear axles, leaving the underbelly quite exposed. And they both have air suspension that you can raise the car with for really heinous speed breakers. I haven't yet had to do that in the S-Class, touch wood. The EQS tends to scrape its low-slung battery pack on a lot of speed bumps here in and around Mumbai, but the S-Class thankfully hasn't quite yet. It's just that little bit better.
The difference in ground clearance between the two is so small it could vary based on what you had for lunch. But to me that sounds like a chauffeur problem, especially in the S-Class, because really it's a Maharaja's Express that's best enjoyed from the back seat. Getting into an S-Class is an experience of old meets new. It's got all the tech and features that you'd expect in a luxury limousine in 2022, but it's also got this very charming old world warmth about it. You buy an S-Class for the seat I'm sitting on. This is the boss seat, and you're going to soon realize why it's among the best seats in the entire automotive sphere. It starts with the seats, they're beautifully cushioned and really well judged. You get into the right frame of mind just by sitting here. And then starts the pampering. You have seat ventilation, you have many ways to control your seat for both backrest recline, headrest position, even the angle of the seat base. And then there are not one, not two, but 8 massaging functions. It's like having a spa on wheels. But for the full experience, you need to kick off your shoes and take the front passenger seat to full extension. This is the way to end a tough day at the office. Really, there are few better ways to travel on the road. And if you're the sort who uses your journeys home as me time, the entertainment screens will sure come handy. Or if you like quiet, the S has you covered there too. What only adds to the soothing feeling inside is the general level of calm. Yes, the S350D is powered by a diesel engine that's not going to be as quiet as the electric motors on the EQS. But for a diesel engine, it is remarkably refined, and all you hear is a slight noise in the distance. And you can't talk an S-Class and not talk of ride comfort. Ride comfort has always been an S-Class hallmark, and that's something true of the latest one as well. It all feels very supple, very cushy. In fact, at higher speeds, it does tend to feel a bit too soft, so you might have to instruct your chauffeur to dial things up to sport mode to keep things more level. Having spent quality time with both Mercs, Gavin and I reconvene.
You know, for two flagship Mercedes sedans with a three-pointed star on the nose, S in the name, and prices that are virtually identical, these two cars couldn't be more different from one another. The EQS is a technological tour de force and makes a really strong case for EVs as being the future of mobility. It's got incredibly long real-world usable range, surprisingly strong performance and handling, and loads of tech. And the difference is, unlike the traditional Mercs of old, this one likes to shout all that tech at you. Here's the thing though, all that is best enjoyed from the driver's seat, and really, if you get an EQS, that's the place you want to be.
But if a large luxury sedan by definition is one to sit back in and relax, you really can't do much better than an S-Class. In terms of space, comfort, features, tech, it has you properly covered. And as your chauffeur will also tell you, it's rather pleasant to drive as well.
So clearly there are two very distinct types of luxury car buyers, and Mercedes with their flagship sedans have managed to cater to both of them. And I think I know which one I'd pick.
But for me, the S is still the S.